Welcome to ACM. We're in Edinburgh, United Kingdom today, and our guest is Vincent Chung. Vincent is Chinese-British, born and raised in Scotland while frequently visiting his relatives in Hong Kong. He's a UK immigration lawyer with dual qualifications in Scotland and England and Wales. He regularly assists businesses as well as individuals from around the world. Vincent has previously worked for a former president of the Law Society of Hong Kong and continues to maintain strong ties with the Cantonese community. Vincent is also an avid marathon runner, having already completed 4 full marathons around the world. In this 4th episode, Vincent and I discussed his journey as a Chinese-British growing up in Scotland, his cultural identity, the UK immigration law and Brexit, and more. A link to his LinkedIn profile is in the description if you wish to reach out to Vincent about any UK immigration-related matters. Vincent.
Chino, hi.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for your time. So, from last episode, we have this new tradition, which is that every guest will bring an item that holds significant value to them, that is personal to them. You brought 2 items. Can you tell us about the items? Which one would you like to talk about first?
So I kind of felt like this was such a curveball. Probably had so much to think about. But the first one I brought is my medal from Chicago. So I ran the marathon in 2019. Mm-hmm. So that's part of a World Series, the World Majors, and there's 6 marathons in total. And once you finish the 6, you get a 6-star finisher medal. So I think it's my vanity in terms of wanting shiny bling bling stuff. So that's kind of why I wanted to do it. But for Chicago, that was my 2nd marathon that I ran in the series. So I've only done 3 so far. I've ran Berlin, Chicago, and London. So Chicago was my 2nd one, and when I got out there, I caught a cold, so I wasn't feeling my greatest. I was taking some medicine beforehand for like a couple of days beforehand, and when I first started, I think it was like the 1st or 2nd mile, I almost tripped up, but I managed to catch myself. And I managed to finish it in good time. It was actually my fastest time out of the 3 that I've done. And I think it was just a sort of testament in terms of hard work and perseverance. And I think that sort of runs quite core to me as an individual and part of my upbringing. So I do like to sort of look at this to remind myself when I'm sort of facing difficult times or sort of feeling under pressure. I'm like, oh, well, if I could do that, if I can run 26.2 miles while being under the weather and still achieving a good fast time for myself, then I can do other stuff that I find quite hard. So that's the first item I brought in.
When during their year were you in Chicago? So which month of the year?
It was October.
Okay.
Yeah.
So decently cold. Good breezy.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, so when I looked up the weather forecast before I went out, it was saying something like 20s or something, 20 degrees.
Okay, that's good.
Around that. So I was like, oh, right, okay, shorts and t-shirts weather. Didn't pack any long sleeves, nothing. And I forgot that Chicago's famously known as the Windy City. Mm-hmm. So shame on me for not remembering that. And just when I got out there, I think it was just with the wind being, the first couple of days being shorts and t-shirts, I think that's probably how I sort of caught my cold. And it probably didn't help that on the day that I was flying out, my flight got cancelled. So I ended up being on the very first morning flight the next day. So again, shorts and t-shirts. Wasn't great, so it didn't help, but no, I got through it and I managed to finish it. So yeah,
the only time I went to Chicago was during winter, and that was really cold.
Yeah.
I mean, windy. I think even for someone who lives in Scotland.
Yeah.
Very odd.
And imagine it would have been sort of really snowy as well.
Yeah, very snowy. Everything's frozen. Super cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And where did then your passion for marathon come from? Since you were a kid, were you always a runner or?
Nah, not really. So I did do sports when I was younger, and so I actually did taekwondo when I
Nice.
was younger. So my mom sort of I think as Chinese parents, my mum and dad wanted me and my siblings to go do self-defense. I think it's just in case, growing up in Scotland. And it was just something to do as well, sort of like a hobby, as it were. So I did that. I think I started when I was 5 years old, and I ended up getting my black belt. And I think I got that when I was about 12. And then as soon as I got my black belt, I stopped. But that was one of the main things that I did sort of consistently throughout my sort of younger years. And then I did sort of take part in sort of like running events,
Okay.
but more so like sprints, 100-meter sprints, relay races. And then just sort of like the odd thing here and there, like my mum would take us out to play badminton or go swimming. So in terms of long distance running, it was never really on my radar. I'd never really had the appetite to do it. But it was just while I was working at my first sort of post-grad job, one of my employees, not my employees, I wish I was an employer, one of my colleagues, she had ran a marathon, and she ran it in France, and she just said it was so cool how running this distance and just having these people cheer on her that didn't know her, and it was just in Paris, like in one of the coolest cities in the world. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool actually. So I then had a look at what kind of marathons there were, and I managed to find the one in Berlin, and I'd always wanted to go to Germany. So that sparked my first marathon sort of inspiration, as it were. So here I am.
When you're running marathon, what do you think about? Do you actually look at the scenery and enjoy the scenery? What's going on in your mind?
Most of the time I'm like, why have I signed up for this again? Why am I such a gluttony for punishment? No, I think it's actually running's quite cool because it's sort of me time, my alone time. And sometimes I'll run with music, sometimes I don't. So when I was training for the London Marathon, I had just moved. So I think that was going into my second year into London, and I had just moved to a new part of London that I'd never been to, and it was around sort of September, October time again. And so I think it must have been after the marathon or just before the Chicago Marathon. I was training for the London Marathon then. And it was dark, and it was a new place, so I kind of felt, probably better not to run with music just in case. You never know, what it's like. And actually, I felt it was quite liberating training without any music. But when I'm actually doing the proper marathon, I will typically have some music just to keep me going. I do sort of take in the scenery. I do sort of take in the cheers of support. It seems so silly, but it is just amazing. The atmosphere is amazing, and when everyone's cheering on you, it does really spur you on. And it's really good. It's really good, and the music does keep me going as well. Sometimes I'll get messages through from my phone to my earphones as well, so that does spur me on. So yeah,
You chose to run in all the sort of darker, kind of cloudy cities.
Yeah,
on average.
yeah.
Might be a nicer actually environment to run long distance. It's breezy. It's not too hot.
Yeah. So
air is crisp.
Yeah, so I've ran, so I've done a few training sessions where it's right in the middle of the summer. It's the heat wave, and one session I did was in London in my first year. I can't remember how hot it was. I think it must have been about 30 degrees or something, but it was quite a big heat wave. Had been so warm like for the few days before, and I was like, well, I can't just not run because on the day of a marathon I don't actually know what the weather's going to be like, so I do have to train through all these types of weather. And it was 30 degrees. I couldn't really run properly. I was basically running from like one shop to another just to get some more fluids in me, and it was such a difficult, such a hard session, but I'm glad I ran it, and I must have been about 15, 20 miles or something like that. So I'm glad I ran it. It took me so much longer than what it would have done, but I think it's quite important to do that and run, because as I say, like, you never know what the temperature's like going to be on the day.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been a lot harder if I was running a sort of in a heat wave the first time than during my training session. So but yeah, no, definitely easier running when it's cooler and not as sunny.
Very remarkable, because I was in track and field as well growing up in school, and I was a sprinter. I did hurdles and stuff.
Yeah.
When you're sprinting, then you would sort of naturally assume that one isn't going to be a great long distance runner, because those two things are basically the opposite.
Yeah.
But you're doing both, so wow.
Yeah.
It's everything in the mental game for you, I guess.
Yeah. And I think it's just probably part of my upbringing. I think my parents just sort of, I wouldn't say they were like super strict. I would probably say my mum was probably like a soft Asian tiger mum,
Okay.
rather than like a hard Asian tiger mum. So I think that sort of like ingrained in me sort of a set of skill sets, and sort of like discipline, to sort of like persevere and go through these, even if it's like a hard thing, a difficult thing. Like, I'm not scared to like face the challenge.
Wow. You spoke about earlier how you were taught martial arts when you were a kid, mainly because of the value of self-defense. That's the same for, I think, a lot of Asian kids growing up. Why do you think that is?
I think it's just the sort of stereotype, I guess, or the fear in our parents that you know, they're not always going to be around us, even as kids. So if we have some self-defense, or if we're taught some self-defense, then hopefully, were we so unfortunate to be in such a bad situation, that we would at least be able to sort of defend ourselves slightly. But I also think it's sort of the sort of discipline aspects of you're sort of being taken to this sort of sport, this hobby as it were, and you have to persevere. You can't just give up. You can't just sort of take up something new and then be like, actually, I don't like it, let's move on to the next thing. So I think that was maybe part of why it's such a sort of stereotype, as it were, that Asians do martial arts. Did you ever do taekwondo?
Yeah, I did. I did taekwondo in Korea, and then I did a little bit of boxing. And then when I moved to Japan, I did kyokushin karate, which is like the most vicious form of karate. I actually loved it.
Yeah.
It was founded by a Zainichi Korean, so a Korean Japanese person.
Right.
And actually, that resonates with me a lot, because I was looking for like kyokushin karate or some sort of more kind of discipline heavy Asian martial art to do in Scotland, because I feel like I needed that ritual. Okay, you know, when you were a kid doing these martial arts, you know, I was just looking forward to the Wednesday football events. You know, like in the Taekwondo dojo, they would basically just do like a football game on Wednesday.
Right. Okay.
Wednesday. So I was only looking forward to going on Wednesdays. And anything meditative or ritualistic, I was so bored of them. But now I'm seeking that in a way. It's sort of a form of religion, philosophy as well. So yeah, that I feel like is something that's lacking, you know, right now for me. But
yeah, did you enjoy taekwondo or?
Yes, taekwondo, because every Korean kid almost, I think, growing up, they're doing taekwondo for self-defense. Maybe now it's changing, a lot of jiu-jitsu and all these things, you know, MMA, famous Korean MMA fighters, you know, popping out in the UFC and such. And then you would play piano or, you know, something like that. Yeah. You got to have some sort of a musical or artistic pursuit as well. But yeah, and then Kyokushin Karate that was very, very, to me, learning Kyokushin Karate in Japan was more kind of to the roots. I felt like it was more heavy-hearted, more serious. for example, I would run into an old peer from the Kyokushin Karate Dojo in Japan after several years of not going, and then we see each other on the train, and he would be like, "Whoosh!" That's the first hi, and I would be like, "Whoosh!" And that's such a totally normal thing to do.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like your version of saying hi.
Yeah. And the way they respect the dojo, before your session begins, you have to mop the floor. You got to do everything, and then after you have to do the same thing. It's I think that sort of mentality is applied on, for example, baseball fields too. When I was training with Japanese baseball team, they would treat the grounds as like sort of almost a holy place. They bow to the ground. They give their thanks and appreciation, and they go on about the training, which is, I think, very beautiful.
Yeah, because I remember when we were doing Taekwondo at the start and at the end of each session, it was always, you sort of do the bow to the hall, the dojo, sort of as the mark of respect. Thanks for.
So you did this in Dundee, in Scotland?
No, so this was when I was still a kid. So I was born and brought up in Scotland. So I lived in Hamilton, just outside Glasgow. So we went to the same place for about I went there for about 7 years. My mum said I could only quit if I got my black belt. So as soon as I got my black belt, I was like, I'm quitting, which is so ironic. And part of me kind of feels like I wish I stuck to it. But hindsight is a beautiful thing.
And then you have the pendant.
Yeah. So that is a jade pendant that I bought from Hong Kong last year. So growing up, I think I can't remember if it was my gran or my mum, like the sort of an older generation, had bought me a gold necklace, and sort of throughout the years I would sort of go back and like sort of get a sort of maybe a bigger, thicker gold necklace, but I actually found that I never ever wore it. So as a kid I probably wore it a bit more, but once I got into my teens, at least, I hadn't worn it for so long, and it was literally just sitting in a drawer collecting dust. So I was like, well, actually, while gold is sort of value, I don't really wear it at all, and it doesn't go with anything that I wear in terms of my fashion sense anymore. So I had this idea, I guess it was sort of over lockdown when there was so much chat about anti-racism and such like that. I think I sort of, during that time, I had the mind space to like think about my identity, my Asian identity, and so I was thinking, well, actually in Chinese culture, jade is quite a sort of a good piece of jewelry item to have. It sort of symbolizes good luck, fortune and such like. So I thought I would just get that, and since I've bought it last summer, I've never really taken it off at all. I've pretty much worn it every day, and it's a sort of good talking piece as well, for people who don't know what it is. And also, actually, I don't know if you know, in terms of Chinese New Year, obviously, well, Lunar New Year has just gone and passed, but in sort of Chinese culture, we're saying that this new year, this year, jade is the sort of lucky piece to be wearing. So I don't know if I just had that foresight or whatnot, but yeah, that's part of it. A big part of it is sort of like my Asian roots, my Chinese roots. So that was the sort of one of the main reasons for exchanging the sort of gold for a sort of slightly less valuable but more meaningful piece of jewellery. So yeah, that's why I bought that.
So you were born in Scotland.
Yeah.
Your parents then were first generation immigrants in Scotland.
Yeah. Well, my grandpa, so my dad's dad came over first, and then he slowly brought. So my dad had quite a lot of siblings. So he, my grandpa had to sort of slowly bring the family over. So my dad came over sort of probably in the second or third time. And then when I guess he was around 20, when he went back to Hong Kong and met my mum, and then she came over as well.
Do you know why your family had chosen Scotland, and in particular Hamilton, to move to from Hong Kong?
I'm sure I've asked this before, but I don't think I remember why specifically. I think it's just one of those things where a lot of people from my grandpa's village chose Scotland, and I don't know why, but specifically Hamilton. So you'll find in Hamilton there's quite a lot of Chungs, and it's sort of not so much, well, not just Hamilton, but sort of throughout sort of Glasgow and surrounding areas. So it's just one of those things, I guess, sort of one of the sort of first generation movers. They just thought, oh, Hamilton's a great place to go to. So
what year was that? Do you know?
No, so my dad came over. I want to say he was maybe about 10 or 11 when he first came over. So he must have came over in the 70s.
Okay.
And so it would have been my grandpa would have came before that. But no, I don't know if my grandpa was the very first one of our our sort of lineage, as it were.
So it could have been almost like a mutual decision by the community coming together and looking at the map. And
yeah.
Or they definitely didn't have Google Maps back then.
So. Or maybe it's just a let's open the map and stick our finger or whatnot. See where the pin drops and where it lands. That's where we're going. So
wow.
Yeah.
Then growing up in Scotland, and you are a British national. Do you have a Hong Kong passport as well? Or?
No, I've got Hong Kong permanent
residency.
Yeah,
okay.
So it meant that when I was younger, when I was growing up, I had to go back to Hong Kong at least, I think it was at least once every 2-3 years, in order to then apply for and get the permanent residency. So growing up, when I was like a kid, I was always like, oh, why are we always going back to Hong Kong? All my friends at school, they're going to all different places, but we keep going back to Hong Kong like every few years. Why is that? And so I think growing up, I hadn't quite appreciated my sort of Chinese identity, as it were. But now, sort of growing up, I can see the benefits and I can see why we went back. It was so that I could see my family in Hong Kong and I could get immersed in that culture, which I think is so important. Sort of not, being Chinese, but not growing up in Hong Kong. So it was really good, and I every time I go back, I so look forward to it.
Yeah. When do you think was that sort of clicking point where you started to appreciate going back to Hong Kong and seeing your family more? Yeah,
I think it was probably around my sort of mid late teens. I think that's just well, there was one summer when I was still at high school, and a lot of my friends, British born Chinese friends, they were all going back to Hong Kong. But there was one summer where I think I was in Hong Kong for about 6 weeks or something. So that was quite a long time for us. And over that time, I saw so many of my friends coming sort of back from Scotland to Hong Kong. And I just had so much fun. I just remember like going out on like junk boat trips and sort of like just topping up the tan, jumping into the sea, whatnot. And it was just such a fun time. And so whilst it was still with my sort of British friends, as it were, British born Chinese friends, we did meet a lot of local sort of friends and families of my friends. And so I think it was really then was when I sort of really clicked and I was like, well, actually, this is pretty cool and like this is quite meaningful and like I should be proud of where my roots are.
What was your upbringing like as an Asian British person in Scotland? Can you share about your sort of early sort of upbringing?
Yeah, so my dad had a Chinese takeaway, which I think is pretty common for his generation coming over, and that was their way of making money. And I just have lots of memories growing up of being at the takeaway. So at the weekends, I had to go to Chinese school first thing in the morning, and then after that, we would then go to my dad's takeaway because if we didn't have anyone looking after us, then we had to be at the takeaway. So that was like one way of like my mum and dad sort of looking after us, as it were, whilst we were there and whilst they were able to run the business. And then as we got a little bit older, we then also had to help at the shop, at the takeaway. So a lot of our weekends, so Friday, Saturdays, it was sort of just working at my mum and dad. So it was fine, sort of, I think, right at the early stages of doing it because I was getting some pocket money or some income, as it were. But it got to a point where I think I kind of felt a little bit rebellious, as it were. So as I was going into sort of my mid-teens, as it were, I was starting to sort of get quite resentful, as it were. And I was like, well, why am I having to like work at my mum and dad's every weekend when all my other friends are getting to go out and have fun? So there was a sort of little part of me, a little period when I was a little bit rebellious, which I'm not massively proud of, but I think it's sort of quite normal to have those thoughts. And I think it's just, I felt like, I think that's why I connected more so much with my other Chinese friends in sort of Glasgow, because they were pretty much all going through the same things. Whereas my friends at school, at primary school or high school or whatnot, they wouldn't be able to relate to that. They would, they would say, oh yeah, like I work as well. I do the news round, newspaper round. And that's like what, like an hour or 2 hours on your bike throwing newspapers about. So it's a completely different thing to sort of finishing school at 3, half 3, and then going to the shop for 4 and then being there till whenever the shop shut. So it was, it was quite difficult. But again, I think that helped me develop a sort of good work ethic, a strong work ethic, perhaps too strong a work ethic. So maybe I'll work a few more extra hours over like my finishing time, over and above at my contract hours. But I would say that was probably more towards the start of my sort of post-grad career, that I was like, oh, I need to put in all these extra hours. I need to be seen to be doing all this hard work. And I don't know if I guess part of that is probably because of having worked in my mum and dad's shop for so long, that it ingrained that into me, and I felt that I had to do that. But not so much now. So now I would only really do that if like I was so busy and I had to get the work done, in which case I will do it. But otherwise I do try to sort of strike that right work-life balance, so I'm not always working late now.
Yeah. You said you went to Chinese school, so is that just sort of like an after school, or you went to a normal British school where you studied?
So it's just a comprehensive school, sort of government funded school that I went to both in primary and high school. So Chinese school was an additional thing, sort of an extracurricular that we went to on a Saturday. So we went to one in Glasgow, and the teachers were I think they were from Hong Kong as well, and it was from I think it was one of the sort of Chinese church groups that was running the Chinese school. So they just rented out a sort of normal sort of British school, as it were, on a Saturday, and we would then just go. So I think it was something like 10 till like 2 or something.
Okay. What was it like going to the Chinese school on Saturdays? How was that different from the normal school you attended during the weekdays?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I just remember is that obviously when we go to normal school Monday to Friday, there's that sort of set routine. You're sort of 9 till 3 or whatnot, and you had to wear a school uniform. So one of the sort of benefits, as it were, to going to school on a Saturday is we actually got to wear casual clothes.
Right.
So it seems so silly, but it's just one of those things that I always felt like, oh, well, if I'm having to go to school, well, at least let me wear what I want. So that was one of the things. But again, because I was going to Chinese school and there were so many of my friends that were also going, it made it a lot easier than if it was just me doing it myself and no one else was doing it. So I was like, oh, well, other people are in the same boat as well, so I don't feel as bad. But it was a bit, I would say it was a little bit difficult sometimes, because I'm like, well, again, I'm having to do like all my homework sort of for my normal school, and now I'm having to do all this extra homework on top. And so there did get a point in my life again where I was like, why am I going to Chinese school? Like, I don't want to do this. But actually, in hindsight, I'm so glad that my mum and dad persevered and sort of kept me going all those years. So I think I went between my ages of 5 and 16. So I was there for quite a sort of long period, substantive period. So while I can't really write traditional Chinese that well anymore, just because I don't really ever need it, I can read a bit more. I read better than what I can write. And so I think that's so
Mandarin
useful.
and Cantonese both?
No, so just Cantonese.
Okay.
So I learned to read and write traditional Chinese, and we learned to speak Cantonese. So it was really useful. So there was one summer sort of in between finishing uni and starting my training as a lawyer that I spent some time in Hong Kong, almost a year, and I was working in a local law firm, Chinese law firm. And I think it was because I had that sort of ability to read and read traditional Chinese and convert in Cantonese. I think that's why I was able to go out and be there for that long, because it was originally just I think it was a 2-month internship. And so I ended up being there for almost a year. And I think that if I wasn't able to read and if I wasn't able to speak Cantonese, I don't think that I might not have got that internship in the first place. But even if I did, I don't think I would have, they would have let me stay as long as I did. And again, one of the benefits of having Hong Kong permanent residence was that I didn't need a visa. So all that helped. So that's why I'm so thankful in hindsight that, my mom and dad spent so much time, energy and effort into making us do these things and go to Hong Kong so regularly, so that now that there's that opportunity, or there's extra opportunities for me if I wanted to sort of go down that route. So,
Then growing up in Scotland and going to the normal schools during the week, what are your friends, or your friends mainly Scottish? You had Chinese, British friends as well, you've mentioned. Yeah,
so I would say that at my primary school, it was pretty much just majority white kids there. There'd be the odd ethnic minority. So I didn't really have that many. So I didn't have any Chinese friends at my normal school, as it were. But my mum and dad would take us to see their family or their friends, and so their kids were around the same age as me and my siblings. So we would go and hang out with them. So there were sort of my sort of core normal school friends, as it were, and then I had my sort of the sons and daughters of my mum and dad, or their friends rather, and then there would be Chinese school friends. So those were kind of the core groups, and then Taekwondo as well.
Did you ever feel like your identity as a Chinese British kid growing up made I guess being in a majority white school difficult or different? Did you ever feel?
I don't think I really had that much awareness through primary school. I think as I got older at primary school, I think I probably then started becoming more aware that I was one of the few sort of ethnic minorities. There were a few times where I experienced some racist slurs at school, and I do remember going to a teacher to say, "Oh, they just said this," and their response was, "Oh, they're just young, so they probably didn't mean it." So I guess sort of at that age, I was a bit I just went to you as a white teacher, hoping you would say something or sort of help me out here. And so I think that I guess I think I was in primary 7 then, so I must have been about 10 or 11. So I think that's probably the sort of first time I really sort of felt almost like helpless, because I went to someone in a position of power to see if they would do something about it. And I guess I had never thought that they wouldn't do anything about it, and their response would just be like, oh, they probably didn't mean it. So that was probably my first sort of real proper encounter. Of course, like when I was younger, there would be like the odd racist slur here or there, but it didn't really hit the same way. So that I that sort of is still quite a vivid memory, because I'm now like 33, 34. So that was 20 odd years ago, and I still remember that specific event so vividly. So I guess sort of like now looking back, I am actually quite disappointed that teacher didn't actually do anything about it, but sort of seen in the light of when it was, in terms of it was the 90s as it were, I guess sort of the anti-racist rhetoric wasn't, not rhetoric, but that sort of concept wasn't really a thing. It wasn't something that was so heavily spoken about. So yeah, it's strange times.
Did you ever confront students, head on, or did you talk to your parents about it?
So that event that I just spoke about, I think because I was still sort of relatively young, and it was a teacher that sort of said that, I guess I thought that was normal. So I never really spoke about it. And my mom and dad were always working. And so they, even if I sort of spoke to them about that, I don't think they would have been able to sort of really say much. And they wouldn't have necessarily experienced it in the same way as I did, because they sort of were brought up in Hong Kong before they came over. And I'm not saying that they've never experienced any racism, but I just feel that I experienced that at school, and they had never really experienced that when they were at school. So it was probably difficult for them, and for them it was probably, or rather, I think for like at least Chinese people, it's being sort of immigrants to the UK, to Scotland. I think it's all about sort of being like the quiet Asian, the good Asian as it were, and not trying to cause any trouble, not trying to stir up any trouble. So I guess part of that sort of made me think that okay, I've probably made a bigger deal of this than what I was thinking. So I guess sort of after that, I never really challenged it or really sort of spoke about it. It was just like this happens, that it sucks, but that's it. Like, what can I do? I did go to someone in the position of power, and they just said nah.
What was your dream as a kid? Do you know what you wanted to be as a kid? What were you like as a kid? What were your interests?
I think I was probably quite an animated kid, a lot more willing to speak my mind, I guess. I guess that's probably true of most children. They don't have that sort of self-awareness, as it were. So I guess I would say I was probably a relatively normal kid in that respect. But in terms of wanting to, what I wanted to be, I actually wanted to be a pilot. And I had actually applied for a job at an airline, Cathay Pacific, which is the flag carrier in Hong Kong. And I applied for them while I was doing my postgrad at uni, and they had actually offered me an interview.
Wow.
And the only reason why I didn't go was because I had my exams. It was around the same time as my exams, and I was like, well, I can't actually.
And you were studying law at the time?
Yeah, so I was doing my postgrad law. So in Scotland, you have to do the LLB law degree, and then you have to do the postgrad diploma before you can do your training contract.
Okay.
So I was doing the postgrad diploma, and I was just like, well, I've got to do my exams. So I gave up on that sort of opportunity. So who knows if I had given up on the postgrad and went straight to do the interviews, I might not be a solicitor. I might actually be a pilot. So growing up like that was sort of my dream job. And I never managed to do it.
Do you ever think about that moment when you turned down the job
well, not all the time, because I do actually like doing what I do. So I guess I'm quite fortunate in that respect. And actually, my eyesight now is so terrible that I'm actually like, would I still be able to be a pilot? With the way that my eyesight is now. But part of me sometimes, not often, but part of me does sometimes think, oh, I wish I did actually just go and do it and see what came of it. And I guess I could always, if I really wanted to, I could always do like sort of private sort of lessons in the small planes if I really wanted to. I know that Dundee has a flying school, so I could always do that if I really wanted, but I think I'm too lazy now to do that.
Are you allowed to wear glasses as a pilot, or do you have your natural eyesight has to
No, I think you can. I think there's a sort of common misconception that you must have 20/20 eyesight in order to fly a plane, but I think, or as far as I recall, you can wear corrective glasses or contact lenses to do it. But I don't know if there's a threshold as to what is still acceptable if you're wearing glasses. So it might be something that I can look into. Yeah.
Then why did you decide to study law?
I get asked this all the time. Why did I go into law? I think part of it was my mum and dad. So sort of I don't know if I'm speaking broadly in terms of Asian culture. So at least in Chinese culture, the ideal is that you become either a lawyer or an accountant or a doctor. So for me, going into law was one of the areas where I think my mum and dad sort of, they never really strongly pushed me to do one thing over another. They were just like, do whatever you want. But at high school, sort of choosing my subjects and sort of choosing what to study at uni, I guess law was one of those few degrees that I was aware of that you didn't need to really have any specific sort of qualifications or marks in a certain subject. So that was one of the reasons why I did it. And actually finishing, graduating from the law degree, the LLB, I was actually thinking of doing sort of surveying or some sort of a built environment topic, because when I was at uni I used to love watching this show called Grand Designs. Have you heard of that? Have you
heard of it? Never watched it.
So it's on Channel 4, and it's basically just a show. It's like each episode is about this family or this person, building their own home. And it was just, it's not just sort of your run-of-the-mill like home. It's like quite grand, hence the name Grand Designs. And I just used to love watching that, and I was like, oh, like I guess I think this is what my passion is in. So I actually wanted to do that, and I just remember saying that to my dad, and he pretty much just flat out said, no, you're gonna finish studying law and you're gonna become a lawyer. So that was like the only real time where my dad sort of really sort of made his thoughts known. But now thinking back about it, I don't think he was like super adamant. So I guess if I really wanted to do something else, he would have supported it. But I guess I just didn't challenge it, and I just went with the flow, and here I am.
Are your parents happy about your job now?
Yeah, of course. I think they would have been happy no matter what I did, but I think they're just happy that I can sort of do this job as it's a professional job. It's sort of, I'm comfortable in terms of like my pay, and I can sort of take care of myself and to a certain extent take care of them as well. And it also just gives them kudos. They can just brag to their friends like, oh yeah, one of my sons is a lawyer.
But you are, very good at what you do, and I have a first-hand experience of this too. The first time I saw you, it was in St. Andrews, and saw you at your office. You had the nicest fitting suit ever. You were super stylish. The thing was, that was my first time actually meeting an immigration lawyer for the in person in Scotland, and yeah, it was a Asian brother, you know?
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
whoa. And I'm trying to gauge what kind of Asian you were.
Yeah, that's standard first time you see another Asian.
And yeah, so I mean, you know, despite the fact that maybe there was some pressure from your family for you to study law, I mean, you look great in suit. I think you
Thank you.
are really good at what you do.
Yeah.
So yeah, and if you want to take up flying, I guess you can do that anytime as well.
Yeah.
Then why in particular immigration law?
Yeah. So why immigration? So at uni, I never got to do immigration at all.
Mm.
It wasn't really a core subject, and I think some unis now are offering that as a module, but it's not a compulsory. It's not a core module. So I never had any experience of immigration, and so I think it was so I had to do a 2-year training contract. And I think I went to an employment law CPD course, and one aspect of it was talking about business immigration. And I think from there, I was like, actually, that sounds really fun. And I think part of it is also to do with my mum and dad also being immigrants to the UK. So I think that sort of went hand in hand. And so I was lucky enough that when I was interviewing for my training contract, that I'd found out that they were about to take on their first immigration partner. So I just mentioned it as part of my interview that I had this interest, and that's how I was just lucky, I guess, right time, right place. And so as part of my training for my second year, I was able to do this sort of full year in immigration. And it did really solidify my sort of thoughts that I did want to do it, because there were certain subjects where I was like, I do not want to do this as a career. So sort of your sort of more stereotypical conveyancing lawyer or private client sort of wills, that kind of stuff. I was like, no, like I know that, you know, everyone's, you know, all different areas have like good things and bad things about them, but I just felt like, no, I kind of want to do something different. And to me, immigration was different. And I guess part of it was because I never got to do it at uni, and I did sort of have that sort of basic interest in immigration, that when I did get to experience it in my training, that I was like, yeah, I do really like this. I do enjoy this, and I get to meet so many international people. Yeah.
Speaking of meeting international people, then your clients are mainly, you said you have mainly corporate clients.
Yeah.
Sort of what kind of nationalities and what sort of backgrounds are your clients mostly from?
Yeah, so when I'm dealing with personal visa applications, it is sort of, it's so broad. It is sort of anyone from whatever in the world. But I would say my most common clients are actually Western country clients. So from the US, from Canada, Australia. I have had some Asian clients as well. Yeah.
And now I guess European clients, because they have to go through the same route.
That
the
good
rest of
old
us.
that small thing that no one's heard of called Brexit.
We'll talk about Brexit a little later.
Yeah.
But perhaps this is a good timing to kind of talk about your expertise in UK immigration, sort of just kind of rough, general, I guess, paths that you could take if one wanted to immigrate to the UK.
Yeah, so I would say probably one of the more common visa routes is the student route. So that's where someone is coming to university or school in the UK. They apply for a student visa. They're sponsored by their school, and they'll get the visa for the length of their studies. So that's one of the more common routes. And then there's the work visa. So there's various kinds of work visas available, but I think the most common work visa that I advise on is called the skilled worker route. And so that's where an individual is sponsored by a UK organisation to work in a specific role for them. So effectively their visa is tied to their employer. And then there's other kinds of visas. So there's like an innovator founder visa. So that's the sort of successor to the previous entrepreneur visa.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's for someone who has a business idea that they want to fulfill, and they want to sort of, start a business, run a business in the UK. That's typically what they would go for. And then there's also your family visa. So if you're a partner of a British citizen, you can apply for a family visa. So those are probably the more common visas that I advise on. There used to be what we call an investor visa.
Yeah.
So that's where if you casually had, loose change of £2 million in your pocket, you could apply for this visa. But a few years ago, they stopped, they closed that visa category pretty much on the day, which is quite unheard of. Just closing a visa category without sort of more notice than like a few hours. So that's something that we get asked about quite a lot now still. And it's been about 2 years, I think, 2 or 3 years that they've stopped that investor visa route. So yeah, we're starting to have to be a lot more creative with how we advise clients and see how and if they fit into a specific visa category.
So for students that are staying for, let's say, 3 or 4 years for their studies, I think 1 year master's included, you can apply for a graduate visa, which gives you another 2 years to basically do whatever you want.
Yeah, so the graduate visa got introduced a couple of years ago as well.
I wasn't applicable for it.
No, I think you were
very upsetting.
Too early. So yeah, the graduate visa is for a foreign student who has graduated from a British university, and they can live and work for 2 years. If they've studied a PhD, I think they have to have studied at least 2 years of the PhD, and they would then get a 3-year visa.
Okay.
But it's non-extendable. So after that period, whether it's 2 or 3 years, then they have to go on to a different visa category. So what we actually commonly find is that a student migrant will either go straight from a student visa straight onto the skilled worker visa, or they'll go from a student visa onto the graduate visa as a sort of bridge, and then go on to a skilled worker visa. Yeah.
But I heard that graduate visa program might be discontinued.
Possibly, yeah.
But they just introduced it
not that long ago, and actually the graduate visa is. It's actually, so there used to be a visa called the post-study work visa. So pretty much the same as a graduate visa. And that was, I think that post-study work visa was, they closed that route in 2012. So yeah, the graduate visa was reintroduced a couple of years ago. But yeah, now they're thinking of maybe, well, I don't really know what they're planning on doing. So at the moment, the government are saying that they're going to have a review of this visa category, and who knows what's going to happen. But it's like, well, you closed it in 2012 and you reintroduced it not that long ago. So why are you suddenly having to like review this again? Is it really that bad? I guess part of it is with the graduate visa is there's no minimum skill set and no sort of minimum salary level. So you can do the sort of lower skilled menial jobs that no one else is doing. But I think that's the sort of the situation that where we're at now is that we have all these sort of jobs that local British or other people don't want to do.
Yeah.
And so these people do it because not necessarily because they really want to, but it's a job and it pays them a wage, and it earns them an income. So someone's got to do it. And especially since Brexit, there's a lot more sort of lower skilled jobs or other jobs that aren't, amenable to sponsorship because we don't have that EU labour market anymore.
Yeah. Seems crazy to me. And the new change that is taking place from April, which is obviously taking the skilled worker minimum salary way up.
Yeah.
There's already a labour shortage. What is what are they trying to do? I don't understand.
Well, part of me thinks it's just all headline grabbing, but I think it is the sort of the rhetoric of, we have to reduce our migration numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously Brexit for them is like their way of controlling migration, which is all fair and well. But on the other hand, you've got these job shortages, skilled and unskilled. But you've closed that gap. You've closed off that EU labour market, and now you're making it a lot more difficult for people to come to the UK to fill these jobs. And you're saying, oh well, we just need to train our or train our own people to do the jobs. But then they're not getting paid enough. They don't want to do it. There's no appetite to do that job. And even if you're saying, oh, you need to sort of train, our own people, that's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a couple of years. So in the interim, you're going to have some sort of policy to, still allow migrants to come and sort of do those jobs. So no, I do think it's quite bad that they're increasing the salary rate. So that's for the skilled worker visa category. So at the moment, as a general rule of thumb, they have to be paid a minimum of £26,200 gross per annum. Yeah. If they are paid that, then they are normally eligible for the visa. There's other criteria as well. But yeah, they're going to increase that up to £38,700 gross per annum. So that's going to make it a lot more difficult. It's probably less of an issue if you're getting a job in London, because you've got your London waiting. They typically are paid more or higher salaries than the rest of the UK. So for people working in jobs that are outside of London, I think
which most of the labor shortages are coming from.
Exactly. I think they're going to really struggle. Really, really struggle.
Is it possible for Scotland to have its separate immigration policy? Probably not. That's a stupid question.
Probably not. Probably not whilst we're part of the UK. I think that it has been discussed in Parliament before because I think it's Canada. Within Canada, there's variations in their sort of immigration systems. So I think part of that was put forward to the UK government, and no, I don't think the UK government would want to implement or allow Scotland to have its own immigration system or like have a say in its own immigration aspects.
So far, in terms of immigration, first-hand immigration experiences, I'd say Japan, United States, and now the UK. And in the US, I tried to get some sort of like an entrepreneur kind of visa thing. Yeah. I have some experience in the EU as well, but I found UK to be quite flexible. Wasn't that extremely challenging. I initially got sponsored by the university, and then I basically moved on to the entrepreneur visa category when it still existed. But despite all that, it's so fickle. It's changing all the time. So why so many changes?
I guess it goes back to the rhetoric of bringing down migration numbers. The route that you're talking about in terms of the entrepreneur route, that closed in 2019. They then introduced the innovator route,
which requires like sponsor bodies, but
so it's an endorsing body endorsing body. So they basically need to get endorsement from one of these approved organizations. And once you've got your endorsement, you can then apply for the visa. Whereas previously, under the entrepreneur visa, it was effectively the Home Office that were assessing the business plans, and if they thought it was okay, then you would get that visa. So they've added that extra barrier, and I'm finding that it is getting more and more difficult for individuals or entrepreneurs to now be able to apply for the sort of successor visas.
Also, isn't there more of a potential conflict of interest? Because I'm not sure now. I think there are a lot more endorsing bodies now than there were when I was initially looking at that visa route. But at the time, it was basically accelerators, incubators, mainly based in London. And I mean, that's sort of a conflict of interest because, I mean, you've just got a handful of endorsing bodies
Yeah.
that are specifically looking for startups in certain industries as well. So it's already kind of alienating. It's not a wide open route for different all kinds of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I think now you have universities and stuff like that too, but that seems to be a little bit
Yeah, so on the one hand, the UK government are saying, oh, the UK, we're open for business, we're open to all this. But on the other hand, their immigration policies say otherwise. It is just so challenging. And I think you raise a good point in terms of these endorsing bodies are typically your accelerators and whatnot, or at least in the sort of last sort of iteration of the sort of entrepreneur visa, it was mostly just them.
and they're private companies too.
And then they charge fees as well, sort of for you to sort of take part in that program. So no, you're absolutely right. It was something that was raised, but I guess I think the Home Office just took the view that, well, it's probably better for a sort of specialist to review and issue the endorsement than us, because we are the UK government or the Home Office are like, we are not specialists in reviewing business plans, so really we shouldn't be assessing whether the business is likely to be successful or not, which I can see some merit. But I think
or you can outsource those things, but not entirely give away that process, to a handful of private companies.
Yeah, because without endorsement, then you can't apply for that visa. So it's difficult.
Are you okay with bathroom break?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Then while we're at it, shall we talk about Brexit a little bit?
Yeah.
So how has the Brexit affected the UK immigration climate? And I guess pros and cons. Pros, maybe if we can squeeze something out, just to be fair.
I mean, the only pro that I can think of is just sort of from a UK government is that they can say, oh, we can control migration. And that's really honestly what I think is the only sort of pro. And I say pro very lightly. I don't see it as like a pro. Yeah, exactly. It's more, if I were the UK government, that's what I'd be saying. But I could say so many cons. So personally, if I want to go to the EU now, I'm subject to the visitor rules. To sort of each EU country, as it were, or I think there's a sort of global rule within the EU that I think I can be there for like no more than 90 days or something, in a 6-month period or something like that. So already there's restrictions in terms of what I can do. I can't just sort of go and live there and work there if I want. I need to go through the sort of same visa process as anyone else that's wanting to go to an EU country. So for me personally, it's closed off so many opportunities. I mean, not that I was really thinking of moving, to somewhere within the EU. I mean, it would have been nice to have that opportunity to go now if I wanted to, but I don't really have that same opportunity as when the UK was still part of the EU. But on the other hand, in terms of people coming to the UK, it does mean that any EU citizen who's coming who don't have a prior UK immigration visa or immigration right, then they need to go through the process. Whether that's through the EU settlement scheme or going through the sort of traditional visas. And it does mean that a lot of our clients are finding it really difficult to recruit for jobs, especially in hospitality. Those are the jobs where you're not really having the sort of local workforce filling those jobs, or there's not enough people filling those jobs. And so we do need all these people, but not all hospitality jobs can be sponsored under the skilled worker route. And with the salary increase, it's just going to make it even harder and more difficult, especially if I see that the hospitality sector are one of the sectors that are going to really sort of feel the brunt of the salary increase. And they're already finding it difficult. So it's really difficult. So I think that sort of Brexit in that respect has been really difficult for certain sectors. so yeah, the hospitality sector, the care sector are also finding it really hard to recruit as well. And the UK government did have to sort of bow to pressure. So previously, only senior care workers could be sponsored under the skilled worker route, but the UK government had to add care workers onto the shortage occupation list, and that allowed care homes to sponsor care workers. But again, with the salary threshold going up, it's possibly going to make it so much more difficult for them now to sponsor.
Yeah. I mean, the beauty of pre-Brexit times for me as a student initially in the UK was that, for example, in St Andrews, because I think different from the English universities, Scottish universities didn't charge EU students any tuition. And what that meant was there were really competitive, competent, intelligent European students that were coming to Scottish universities, and most of my friends were sort of the recipient of such benefits. And my best friend, who was from one of my closest friends, who was from Austria, he's an Austrian diplomat, and I met him in St Andrews. And I don't think he would have chosen to come to St Andrews if he couldn't attend free of tuition. And now that all of that has changed, I think the university, the environment is changing as well. So it's I don't know what else nice things to say about Brexit.
No. I mean, with the EU settlement scheme, which is the sort of scheme that was introduced as as part of the withdrawal agreement, that individuals can still make late applications under that, but there's been so much changing of the goalposts over the last couple of years about what constitutes an acceptable late reason, and it's created so much uncertainty. And you do have situations where EU citizens acquired a right of permanent residence under the EU free movement rules. And so overnight, if they didn't make an application under the EU settlement scheme, then technically they no longer had status. So they were permanent residents, one night, and then the next night they weren't. So it just created all this unnecessary paperwork and bureaucrat and uncertainty in people's lives. And I think what probably would have been better is that if the UK government sort of made a positive thing, that if anyone was here with this status, then they would all be here legally, but no, it's the obligation was made or placed on individuals to make an application.
I remember all my European friends, and I think just when I was graduating, that's when the switch was happening, frantically looking for the application, passing links around, trying to apply for it. Just mad, completely mad. So you worked in Scotland for most of your career, but you also worked in England recently. And despite the fact that they're both the same country, two different kingdoms, same country, right? Were there any major differences in terms of your work?
Yeah, so I find that. So I worked down in England for I think about 2-3 years. And I think it's just the type of firm it was that it was more sort of business centric. I had to go to Turkey a couple of times to sort of meet prospective clients or do a bit of business development. So there was more opportunities there because I was effectively the only immigration employee there. And there was sort of more of an onus of me trying to develop the business. So that was quite different because at that point when I joined that firm, I was only 2 years qualified as an immigration lawyer. So that was one of the big differences I found. But also the firm that I worked for, it was an alternative business structure. So actually we were a law firm owned and working within the accountant's firm.
Oh.
So it's quite an interesting legal concept that I don't think it's something that's actually a thing yet in Scotland. They've been talking about it since I was at uni,
Hmm.
or perhaps it is a thing, but it seems to be less of a big deal anyway. Up here, but in England, it's quite a common thing. So that I find quite a different concept to. While we spoke about it at university, it was quite a difficult. Initially, it was quite a difficult concept to grasp. That I'm working for lawyers, but we're owned, and my colleagues are accountants. So that was quite a strange thing. But I felt like because of the nature of the firm, they worked with a lot of family offices. And so a lot of the work in a lot of the visa categories I was advising on sort of did revolve around the investor visa when it was still a thing, and then the entrepreneur visa, because it was a case of people trying to get effectively second residence, and so the investor visa route and the entrepreneur route were the sort of more obvious routes for them to go to, because a lot of the times it was like, how do we get mum and dad over so that the kids can also come over to go to school in the UK? So that sort of, I find that to be quite a different focus, because at my first firm in Scotland, it was personal migration as well as doing corporate immigration. So it's quite difficult, not difficult, quite different in that respect. I think what I found to be a bit of a challenge was being the only Scottish qualified lawyer in this English firm. But I mean, it didn't. There wasn't a bar on me practicing immigration, because immigration is UK wide, so it doesn't matter if I'm Scottish qualified or England qualified. I was still able to advise on immigration, but it was just a little bit different, and unusual to be sort of almost falling under the regulation of the English regulators now, even though I wasn't English qualified. So
what is the difference between English and the Scottish qualification?
It's more so in terms of we've got, so when Scotland sort of became part of the United Kingdom, it was agreed that the Scotland would retain its own Scottish legal system. So we've got a complete distinct legal system to England, and so our laws differ in that. So a lot of the sort of conveyancing stuff is completely different. A lot of the criminal law is completely different. So in Scotland, I am, or first and foremost in Scotland, I'm regulated by the Law Society of Scotland. But when I was down south, I sort of retrained, as it were, and I'm now dual qualified, so I'm also regulated by the SRA, which is the Solicitors Regulation Authority in England. So it was just strange to have to then, I mean, in terms of the regulation, pretty much, there's a lot of similarities, but there were some things that I found that I was like, whoa, like we didn't do that in Scotland. Like, why are we having to do this all of a sudden? So that was a little bit strange. And just, it's almost like having no one to speak to in some respects, because like we went through such completely different pathways to get to where we were. But now here, like all my colleagues were English qualified, and it's just me that was Scottish qualified, so it's quite different. But they didn't treat me sort of, they really welcomed me into the team. They were really good, so that was really good. There wasn't really that sort of.
I was looking for something saucy.
Saucy, yeah, maybe off mic.
But culturally, I mean, it's very similar. Not anything very hugely different.
Nothing hugely different. No.
Okay, that's great. What is the most fulfilling and enjoyable part about your work? And then we'll talk about the opposite as well.
Yeah, I really enjoy working with, whether it's with my corporate clients or with personal clients, it's sort of working out what it is they need, explaining it to them and helping them achieve that. And it sounds cheesy, it is part of my job, and it is my job, but it's just, I find it really fulfilling to sort of being able to problem solve and find a solution for them. And I really sort of enjoy getting that positive feedback from them and getting that sort of almost like reassurance that, I did good job and I am doing good. So sort of earlier on in my career, I would say that I had quite a bad case of imposter syndrome. And so I was always like, oh, like I'm messing up, like I'm gonna get found out, like why did they hire me, like why am I doing this job? And I think it's like in the last couple of years I've sort of really sort of grown into my position, and I kind of really own it. And I think I'm just more confident in my own skills and experience to do that. So I still like getting that positive feedback just for that reassurance. But yeah, no, I do really enjoy helping clients find that solution. What I do find a bit hard is sometimes when I do have to tell a client, well, actually, I can't help you because you don't meet the requirements. And it's sort of seeing that almost like disappointment. And I know it's not disappointment in me, sorry. I know it's not disappointment in me, but it's just sort of seeing that disappointment that they can't come to the UK to do what they wanted to do. That's quite difficult.
Well, the reason why I'm here today is because you helped me get here.
Yeah.
After my service and working through that. Do you recall the first time we've met?
Yeah, it was, as you said, it was in St Andrews in that office. So I think that would have been after the merger. So the firm that I was working for, they had just, I think they'd recently acquired that firm. And so we hadn't always had a St Andrews office. And it was after that acquisition, that merger, that we had that. So no, it was quite good. No, I do remember you were still a student at St Andrews. It was in I think it was one of the sort of back offices where we could look onto the tennis court. Yeah.
Tennis court.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of problem solving and helping clients sort of, solve their problem and giving them the opportunity to be in the UK and doing what they want to do and stuff like that. I guess at the time my queries were mainly to do with, now we can talk about it because I mean, what is it called when the solicitor isn't allowed to talk about a confidential, like the client confidentiality? But this doesn't apply here because there's
you
no
brought it up.
I brought it up.
I've been waiting for you to bring it up.
I mean, I can't quite remember what exactly we discussed, but I think it was like a route for me to get the entrepreneur visa, because at the time I was a student. I was just about to start a business, and we knew that was not possible. And then the other option, which was, how can I get permanent residency as soon as possible so I can potentially avoid military service? And I can talk about this now because I have completed my military service.
Congrats.
I served in the Marine Corps, proudly. And so, and I was trying to avoid it for
as long as you could.
For as long as I could,
But it caught up.
What was your impression of me when I brought up these things to the table?
So I think in terms of the sort of general stuff that we spoke about, it was fairly common for a student visa holder. But I think when you mentioned the military service, that I think you're maybe one of my first clients to bring that up. And I was like, oh, like, is there a way that we can help you avoid that legally, of course. But no, I don't think we could find a way, and I think so. We spoke about some of the sort of general options that were available for you in the UK after your studies, but no, I don't think we obviously didn't find a way to bypass that military service. But I think you did enjoy it in hindsight.
I think in hindsight, I'm glad that you weren't. Let's say
I wasn't too good at my job.
No, you weren't unorthodox or sneaky enough to figure out a loophole.
No, I like that better.
But I think for me, military service was always that sort of that barrier for me in terms of my perception of Korea, my perception of home. And once I took it full-heartedly and solve that problem by actually doing the service and doing the service in the toughest way possible as well, I think that has changed my perception of Korea and therefore home recently. It freed me in a way, and it makes me realize how much that had affected my relationship with Korea, home, national service. And for you, obviously, you've had a very different upbringing, background. And throughout these years, how has your perception of home changed? What is your perception of home?
Yeah, so I guess I always feel a little bit conflicted. So obviously I was born and brought up in Scotland. So Scotland will always be my home. But at the same time, I'm not, my ancestors, they aren't Scottish. They're Chinese. They're from Hong Kong, and I guess to a certain extent China, if we kind of look at it more broadly. So, in terms of Hong Kong, what I would say is that obviously in more recent years, the political situation in Hong Kong has, got to a point where we are finding other countries introducing visa or immigration schemes which allow certain people from Hong Kong to come over, and I think that speaks volumes about the situation, about Hong Kong and how it is. Obviously, you will find in any situation you'll find people in both camps. Some people say it's a good thing, others are saying it's not such a good thing. Also, that just comes down to your personal views. But I have seen that there's been quite a lot. Hong Kong news doesn't traditionally, or things that happen in Hong Kong don't traditionally make it into Western news. But I would say that in recent years, in the last 10 years or so, every so often you might see some news reports about Hong Kong. And I think, again, that speaks volumes. If a Western country doesn't traditionally report on Hong Kong, like, why is it now something that they do speak about? So I guess that has, and sort of like from that sort of political sense, as it were, I do find that when I do go back, that some of my local Hong Kong friends, they are, by and large, most of them do sort of want to leave Hong Kong because of how, for them, that has been their only home.
Yeah.
And they are just like, no, like, it's gotten to the point where so much is happening and we don't really like it. So now it's time to, like, move on and, like, try and go somewhere else, move somewhere else. So, yeah, I sort of, from that local perspective, that's what I would say that they would say about Hong Kong.
Korea is also geopolitically unstable. And I think, from my experience, a lot of Koreans who live in Korea, fantasize about being able to live abroad, live in Europe, for example, live in America, leave Korea. And in a way, I am living that fantasy.
Yeah.
But by living that fantasy, I actually oftentimes envy people living in Korea, being able to eat the food they eat, having access to all the convenience or the, beautiful things, aspects of our society and culture, despite the geopolitical issues.
Yeah.
So, there's a saying in Korean, 남의 떡이 더 커 보인다, which means the other person's rice cake looks larger than your side. Grass is greener on your side.
Yeah.
So maybe, it's an aspect of that.
Yeah.
But maybe you have to leave home in order to understand, or perhaps, perceive what home is to you.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Sort of in terms of when I moved down to England for the sort of couple of years I was down there. Initially, it was very much like, oh, I'm moving to London, I'm moving to the capital, so I was sort of younger, and, just so excited about the thought. But actually, the longer I was there, the more I was like, well, actually, home wasn't that bad. Why did I leave? So actually, when I did I wasn't actively looking to move back up to Scotland, but when the opportunity presented itself, I was like, oh, I'll come back up. And actually, I sort of moved back up initially just because, we were still in lockdown at the time and we were working from home. And so I was like, well, actually, I can come back up for a bit. And then, once things get better, I'll move back down. But actually, the longer I was up in Scotland, the more I was like, well, no, all my friends and family are here. It's a completely different lifestyle. The cost of living is so much lower.
Yeah.
It's just, so it's not that I don't like London, and I will happily go down and visit, but I don't think I will sort of anytime soon be moving down unless I win the lottery or something.
So it's the financial aspect that is
I do find it's really it is harder. Your money doesn't go as far. It costs money to sort of travel around London. It costs to eat at restaurants. Obviously, it costs to eat at restaurants here, but it's just a lot more expensive. But then you've got more variety down in London. It's just so multicultural.
So if there was no such thing called money and you had full access to everything that existed, London versus, let's say, Glasgow or Edinburgh, where would you choose to live?
Probably still Glasgow.
Yeah.
So being Scottish born, I have obviously drank the tap water in Scotland all my life, and hopefully you agree as well. But it just tastes so much nicer in Scotland. The water down in England, it's just all chalky and lime scaly, and it's just not great. So that itself would be a reason to stay in Scotland. And actually, I spoke about that point so many times when I was doing networking events as part of my job.
It just comes down to water.
Quality
of water.
That's it.
Actually, Scottish water is, it is beautiful. It is divine.
It's just very crisp.
Yes.
Yeah.
Austrian water, I would say about the same.
Yeah.
Austrian water would taste really good too, tap water. But in terms of taking showers and stuff, it affects my skin negatively. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It also could be the dryness and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I need some level of humidity.
Yeah.
But I would say in terms of drinking water, it's up there.
Yeah.
A video, there's a Scottish comedian that goes around saying, "What? Scottish drinking water?"
Yeah.
Do you know that one? With it's like you get the free water.
Yeah.
You go buy still water. Why are you buying still water?
Yeah.
It goes back his own.
Yeah.
You could pay for Scottish tap water. It's that solid.
Well, whenever I came back up for visits, I would always be trying to fill up as many bottles as I could to take back home, back down to London. So
you can buy Highland Spring.
I could, yeah. So no, but I also think with London, it's just obviously it's such a densely populated city. It's so multicultural. Everyone wants to go there, but the other hand of that is that it's just so busy, and I find it's really difficult to make friends in such an environment. Everyone's almost looking, they're looking out for themselves. They're not really, wanting to sort of make friends or whatnot. So I find it really hard to make friends down there. Whereas I'd say Glasgow, after the Commonwealth, the slogan was people makes Glasgow, and that's still a thing that they talk about. And I do think that's true. Maybe I'm biased because I'm from outside Glasgow.
Well, for a non-British or non-Scottish person, I would have to say that there is what I do appreciate about Scotland is definitely the people. Just even the way, for example, when you're driving, I think the Scottish people are the politest drivers I've seen.
Do you think?
Generally speaking, I think so. You don't think so? Maybe you're driving a fast car, and maybe you're not, just because you aren't, Vincent. But I would say in terms of giving ways and saying thank you.
I would say generally speaking,
you've had bad experiences.
I mean, haven't we all?
Have you drove in Hong Kong, London?
I drove in London. London was really bad. I felt
bad.
It was every other day there was some sort of accident. Whether it was down to bad driving, whether it was down to road rage, or whatnot. But yeah, no, I would say I would agree with that. It is generally better like up here.
I'd say the only other city or other countries, maybe two, Japan,
Yeah.
very solid, but it's also the roads are so nice.
Yeah,
I mean,
no
Scottish
potholes.
where the tax money going to? I don't understand. They're always doing road works,
yeah.
but nothing is improving.
No, the potholes are still there.
So Japan, I think Korea's a little tough. Vermont, United
Right,
States,
okay.
specifically Vermont. So depending on the state you go to in America, it's different,
Right.
vastly different. I'd say Vermont drivers are very nice.
Right.
I've driven in New York, Boston, LA, the major cities in the US. New York and Boston are tough.
Yeah.
I
Just
drove
because people are quite aggressive.
very aggressive.
Yeah.
Also, New York is just every block there's like a just people popping by like left and right, popping up. And yeah, Europe, Scotland is up there.
Yeah.
Say maybe Vermont and Japan.
Yeah. Have you ever
Same.
driven in London before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not fun.
Yeah. It's just
Yeah.
I feel like for me, I'm a relatively confident driver, but
Yeah.
I find that when I was driving in central London, I don't know if it's just because I wasn't familiar with the roads. But no, I did find it really scary. It wasn't pleasant, and then there was of course the congestion charge as well. So that wasn't great because I was like, am I in the zone now or am I not?
Yeah.
So no, not a pleasant.
It's also the safety because I drove down to Manchester, and I mean, no offense. I mean, Manchester was actually, it was a very enjoyable time in Manchester. A lot of cool, hip things going on. Am I explaining myself too much? Okay. But no. I couldn't possibly just, I didn't feel safe enough to just leave things around the car, like visibly. Yeah. In Scotland, I would just like leave stuff on.
Would you?
Yeah.
Oh no,
you wouldn't.
I don't know if it's just my upbringing. I just whenever
it depends on where. I mean, to be honest, I've had my motorcycle stolen in St. Andrews.
Right. Okay.
Found in another part of Fife.
Oh,
so okay, those things happen. But let's just say, generally speaking, Edinburgh, for example, I wouldn't feel that scared to leave something on my. Card.
I mean, I've never had any negative experiences, but I'm also very like proactive, and if I'm gonna leave something in my car, like I have it covered by like a blanket or something, so I don't want to attract attention needlessly. Again, like touch wood that it's not going to happen. I've never had any thing go wrong, but I think my parents, my mom's car got broken into like twice in a sort of short space of time. Yeah, it was quite a long time ago now. Okay. I was still at school, so I don't know if part of that has sort of like ingrained in me that you can't ever leave anything in the car. But if I have to, I always make sure that it's covered and like park in a well lit area. But no, like I would never actively leave.
I mean, to be fair, I was in St. Andrews and in Edinburgh. I mean, those are not exemplary places to let's just sound like a snob, leaving much. I mean, I've had my motorcycle stolen. That was a heartbreaking moment.
Did you get it back?
I did, but it was all painted and changed, and they thought if they painted over in black, it was going to be any different, But, and then they gave the motorcycle back, but then it's not the same bike,
oh gosh, that sucks.
Yeah, and then I had to get anyways. But in Korea and Japan as well, do you know that like we leave our laptops, our phones, our wallets on the cafe table? Like in order to reserve the seat, the table, we just leave our phone or a wallet, like a handbag. And then you go. That's crazy, right?
Yeah, I would never do that anywhere.
Growing up, that was I lost a bag in, let's say, on a subway in Tokyo, and then I'll just go to the nearest koban, which is like a little police stop. Yeah, and they would have it.
Oh right, okay. Yeah. So people would actually hand it in. Yeah,
or they would just leave it as where it is in case the owner comes back for it.
Yeah.
So I've done that once in New York, and I got really scolded at by somebody. Are you trying to get someone in trouble? Like, are you trying to, you're setting up basically
Yeah.
by leaving a valuable thing on the table, trying to
Yeah.
get somebody in trouble.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah, no.
No.
Like, if I have to, like, I might put my jacket down
Okay.
because that doesn't generally have anything of value in it. But sometimes you do have to leave things. But if I have to, like, it is like a jacket or something that I know that, if it does get taken, like, I'm not gonna like feel bad about it or whatnot.
So I have a few closing questions now.
Yeah.
Something more personal. What gives you joy in life? Generally speaking, day to day.
Generally speaking, that's a good question. I would say my dog. Is that cheesy?
Well, you were going to bring the dog. Is it small enough to put it?
No, my
It's a big dog?
Yeah, well, not massive. He's a medium-sized dog.
Okay.
He's a Labradoodle.
Oh.
So he is just over 2 years old. I've always wanted a dog, but I just never had. So my mum didn't really like animals at all growing up, so we didn't have a dog. And then when I did get my job, I couldn't, because I was working full time in the office, so I couldn't just have the dog in the flat by itself. Whereas I work more from home now, so there is that scope to leave the dog at home. So no, it's really cute, sort of like coming in first thing and then seeing him like all like excited and wanting to go out and stuff.
Oh.
So that he is really cute. He brings joy to my life.
I have a dog in Korea.
Yeah.
His name is Chunso.
Yeah. Oh,
It's like a white
what kind
mountain
of
dog.
Oh.
A Korean mountain dog mixed with, I think, some sort of a white shepherd.
Right.
So it's got like the physique of but larger physique of a Korean mountain dog,
Right.
like Chindo dogs, for example. But it's got really fluffy, like beautiful hair.
Yeah.
Super soft. Because
Yeah.
white Korean dogs tend to have very stiff hair,
Right.
but he's got very soft hair.
Oh, nice. So
very,
very
very
cuddly.
sport. Yeah.
No.
More independent.
Right.
I think he's becoming a little bit more domesticated now.
Right. Okay.
Now that I think my mother had left him in a dog hotel a few times, I think he feels like, okay, now I need to fight for my
my place in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
How old is he?
Just around the same, over
Right,
2 years.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
between 2 and 3. Yeah.
First family dog or first dog ever?
Not first family dog, but I was too young
Right.
to remember having dogs. I think when I was a kid, I dropped one on an accident and I think damaged its organs.
Oh, bless.
I know. And I only had traumatic experience with family dogs
Right. Okay.
up until this one.
So let's move on. Let's move on.
Yeah. Okay, so that's great. That brings you joy and happiness.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. You got a long way to go too. I mean, dogs now live for a long time, right?
Yeah, I think
Wow.
like 13, 14, if not more.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's hope that he's in for the
Amazing.
long run.
Scotland is a great place for dogs, but if like my dog, who is a clean freak,
Yeah.
if he sees a puddle, he will go around it. He doesn't like getting things messy. So
Yeah.
after he goes on a walk, he comes back home. He doesn't come inside the house. He waits outside so that he could get his paws cleaned.
Yeah.
Imagine coming to Scotland.
Yeah.
He will go he will have a panic attack.
Traumatized by it all.
He'll get traumatized.
Yeah. No.
Puddles everywhere. He can't walk.
Yeah, no, my dog loves like running into puddles, through them, jumping into rolling in the mud,
Yeah.
like everything. Just your sort of stereotypical British dog, I guess.
We just talked about something very positive and joyous, but now we have to talk about the other end, which is what is your most memorable challenge that you've faced so far in life?
It's a good question. It's quite a deep question. I would say so it's not one specific experience, it's just sort of these experiences at work. So when something doesn't go quite to plan, and now we're kind of like on the back foot, we're having to try and help a client fix their situation. I do find that quite difficult. I almost take it too personally. And so that sort of has quite a big impact at the time. It's not an ongoing thing. It doesn't happen regularly, thankfully. But when it does happen, it's just sort of almost like so much pressure now to try and resolve that issue. And it's that because immigration is so
very personal.
So it's like when things go wrong, it's like, oh, like crap, how do I fix this? So
because usually it's about family too.
yeah, but sometimes like even with like business immigration, so like we've got a situation where we've got a client who they're a sponsor. They're trying to bring someone over on a skilled worker visa. The main applicant has got their visa, which is fine, but it's the kid. There's a difficulty with the kid because the other parent, basically mum and dad are like separated, and the other parent isn't coming to the UK. So it's that kind of situation where, like, I had advised them that this was going to be an issue. It's a complex issue. It's going to be quite difficult. And ultimately, the kid's visa got refused. So we're now kind of trying to sort that out. So that was something that I had fully advised. So that I don't feel so bad about. But it's the sort of unplanned, unexpected hiccups that happen. And I sort of like, I think I add like a lot of pressure. I get too hard on myself, and then I tend to overthink. So I kind of almost go down this sort of rut, and I'm like, oh, like I kind of like think the worst. So that is, thankfully, it doesn't happen too often. So when it does, when it does happen, it's not a very pleasant experience because I think I do get too hard on myself. Yeah, I blame myself for everything. So that's quite difficult. And sort of, I would say, is a big challenge. And I don't think it's ever going to like really go away. I think it's just part of my personality, part of who I am. But maybe it's just one of those things that will get a bit easier. So I'd mentioned earlier about having imposter syndrome. So like hopefully just as sort of I get a bit older again, like these things are not going to faze me as much.
But if I am being represented by an immigration attorney, I would totally want to be represented by somebody who takes my problems to their heart, and even develops a level of emotional connection with it too. So, and that's probably why I had a great experience with you.
Thank you.
So, the last question is, the second to last question is, if you had to choose one dish to eat for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It's so hard, so many things to choose from. I think if I really had to choose, I would probably go for wonton noodles in Hong Kong. Like, they're just so good. Very tasty. Every time we go back to Hong Kong, it's the first thing that me and my family always go to get. It's just super tasty, very nice, very fresh, very yummy. I think that's probably one of the first things. It's absolutely the first thing that we always go.
Clear soup with the dumplings and
yeah. Have you had that before?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I love the Asian broth.
Yeah,
I guess they are like soups to us.
Yeah,
but it's not like creamy or heavy soup that you would usually expect when you ask for soup, here
in our Western countries. Yeah.
But it's the broth.
Yeah,
they have so much. They're so full of story and personality.
Yeah,
and
lots of good nutrients.
That's right. So when I work, let's say in the weekends, I just keep a broth going for like 8 hours.
Right. Okay.
Just sitting.
Yeah, but I feel like with like Asian soup, or at least Chinese soup, again, like my mom like puts a good like lots of hours into it, and it's like a lot of sort of thought, effort into it. It's not like sort of traditionally Western soups are like creamy, and you just sort of boil it up and then you blitz it and then that's it. Whereas like ours is it's that comes from the heart.
Well, good choice. Great choice. I actually had wonton soup 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Nice.
Homemade?
Nice thing about Edinburgh, well, Unfortunately not, but we've got good Chinese restaurants here.
Yeah.
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 And more Hong Kong Chinese as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the last question.
Yeah.
For those who are seeking a career in law, specifically immigration law as well, do you have any advice for them?
Don't do it.
What?
No.
Be a pilot.
Be a pilot. Yeah.
Or a surveyor.
Don't give up on those dreams. Don't follow your parents' dreams. No, I think if you want to be a lawyer or an immigration lawyer, I think it's... And I sort of mentor quite a lot of younger people, and I think it's just so easy to get so wrapped up and focused on how do I become a lawyer that all their extracurriculars kind of revolve around law experience. And actually it's like, no, think about getting wider world experience. Like,
hence the marathon.
Yeah, exactly. Have hobbies, have things that you can talk about at interviews, different things. A firm doesn't really want to, speak to 100 people who did the same thing, follow the exact same pathway. Actually sort of think about doing different things and having variety, because it's not good to put all your eggs in one basket. So that's actually the sort of advice that I tend to give sort of younger people who are thinking about law. Is like, great, if that is what you want to do, here's the sort of traditional pathway, go get your degree, get a training contract. But it's not just about that, it's about also living your life and, working up these, developing these other experiences. So I worked in retail, as part-time jobs. I worked in my mum and dad's takeaway. I did internships here and there. I, went and did summer camp. I worked at a summer camp in the US. So I think it's all about sort of, if you can, do all these different things so that when you are at an interview or when you are applying for jobs, that you can talk about all these different things. And I think that actually puts you in a much better position than, every other Joe Blogs who's done the exact same thing. And, it's not, there's no diversity. We like diversity. So that would probably be my advice for someone who wants to be a lawyer. I think if you want to do immigration, I think specifically UK immigration, I think it's probably good if you can work in sort of do some of the more personal aspects and perhaps some of the asylum claims as well, because that sort of really helps you focus on sort of helping your client. It's so personal. It's so it does really engage your emotions, and I think that does help you become a better lawyer. I think if you only ever did corporate immigration, you'll never really truly see it from the sort of other point of view. So I think if someone wants to be an immigration lawyer, I think working for charities that work with these people or whatnot, I think that would probably be quite good. Even if you don't end up doing it, but at least you've got that experience. So yeah, I guess it's just trying to get as much experience as you can, varied, not specifically just in law as well. So have that good balance is probably what helps.
It's wonderful advice.
Yeah, thank you. I wish someone told me that.
But you've lived a life like that, so
yeah,
you've done that without someone having to tell you that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Do you believe in miracles? In something called love? If everything happens for the first time, what would you call it this time? Do you believe in miracles? In something called love? If everything